Coronation Street comes in at number 4 in my soap opera rankings for July 2022. The British soap opera falling a little bit more in my rankings after being number 1 for so long. The thing that Coronation Street is now missing is that one big solid storyline that it had for the most of 2021 and even had for almost the entire first half of the year. This year, it no longer has that story, and it's throwing a lot of other stories at us, but I'm just not connecting with enough of them. And then there's one that I just don't like, which I will get to. However, Coronation Street can't fall any lower than this anytime soon because of the writing. The writing on Coronation Street, not as solid as it's been, but still, the writing on this show is a lot better than any show below it in the rankings, and that is what keeps Coronation Street high enough. The stories might not be the most exciting right now, and some of them might even be annoying, but the writing is still just stronger than some of these other shows that can be hard to watch some days. We're going to talk about some of the Coronation Street stories. I'm going to talk about the strongest story first, which to me is honestly Kelly, especially since Kelly was a character that when she first came onto the show I despised, but during her homeless story and taking the fall in prison for a while, they did a good job of redeeming her. She was not like a lot of these villains on some of these soap operas that they make so irredeemable or cartoonish that I talk about a lot. Kelly was written with a lot of regret, and so she's always had her troubles, but she's never really been a one-note villain. And so now seeing her possibly develop with Audie, I hope they become a real couple, because he needs a real couple, seeing as he and Summer fizzled out and just were friends, because Summer's a problem of her own. I probably won't even be talking about Summer this month. She wasn't on enough, and she just stays in annoying stories. They're having a very hard time making me care about Summer. But I do care about Audie and Kelly. This month of July showed Kelly getting kind of in trouble again. She's known for having a past history of getting in trouble, maybe making some mistakes, and one of her mistakes led to her getting kidnapped this month. Gary had to save her, and when Gary did save her, Gary was going to kill the kidnapper, and that gave Kelly an insight into Gary's always been a hothead, but it gave Kelly an insight into what Gary might actually be capable of, because it is yet to come out that Gary killed Kelly's father during his villainous stint under Kate Oates. Gary also responsible for Rana's death, and kind of a bad thing that they killed Imran because of that he never really got to find out the truth about Gary. But maybe we'll get the impact on this other side of things. Maybe it will be Kelly that eventually learns what Gary did, because it has to come out at some point. And now Kelly's seeing what Gary is actually capable of. It could make that story very interesting going forward. I would like to see it come out what Gary has done in the past. Now, the story I despise, honestly, is Fizz and Phil and Tyrone. I will never get any sort of popularity for Tyrone and Fizz. I will never get it. Maybe in the early days of these characters, what I've seen of it, I can see why they were kind of popular once upon a time and had a decent story. But the longer they've been on the show, I find them so annoying. And they took center stage in July. That's why it was kind of easy for me to drop Coronation Street another spot, because this took center stage. Tyrone cheated on Fizz all these months ago, and Fizz had moved on with Phil, but now, of course, she just wants to go back to Tyrone, and Tyrone's like Phil's only friend, and Fizz and Phil are in marriage counseling, even though Fizz and Tyrone are kind of just going behind his back, even though he now knows that Fizz may have been seeing another man. I know this is supposed to maybe be somewhat comedic. Maybe that's what they're going for this, but they make Fizz and Tyrone look terrible, and they always look terrible. Why? I would not have ever kept these two characters around as long as this show has. Honestly, the same goes for Sean. And maybe it's something because I've read something many years ago about how the actors and actress that played these three characters, Fizz, Tyrone, and Sean, and how they acted backstage, and how they, were kind of like a clique, and maybe that's why they had some sort of like power on the show within their characters, because they were all so close that it made the show want to continue to write for them. And honestly, since they've been on the show this long, that's the only explanation that makes sense. That's something that has always stuck with me, reading that backstage gossip, because there's no other reason that these three characters would still be on this show so many years later, in my opinion. If I was in charge, they'd be gone a long time ago. So I do not enjoy this Fizz and Tyrone and Phil story even slightly. Sean had his own story this month. Sean, at least, is always on the back burner, usually. But we saw Sean standing his ground, sticking up for his son. And we'll see where they continue to go with that story, but I'm not really that interested in it. Toya's story took an interesting turn when the character of Spider returned, a beloved character from the past. I only know a little bit of Spider from the past. So far, I am okay with this, Spider returning into Toya's life. Spider still being this environmentalist. They seem to want to give Spider maybe a little bit more of an edge this time around, and I don't know if that's going to go over so well, because Spider was always just this stand-up guy, but we'll see where they actually go with that. Toya's still getting over Imran, especially when she has his ashes. She's kind of going through it, and Spider's now back in her life. I'm going to wait and see where that actually develops and goes. What other possible stories? There was a lot of stories. Ed had a little bit of a story getting electrocuted while working for Debbie. So I'm sure that will lead to some storyline of like suing Debbie, maybe. We'll see. Audrey's still been testing the family about her will, and Steven coming back to town thinks he's been responsible for a lot of arguments within the family. But we're seeing Audrey and all of her problems. We see her drinking too much. We see her taking too many sleeping pills. She's been going through it lately. I don't know where this story's going, which is something I also kind of like about Corey, because I never really have a big idea where they're going with some of their stories. So it makes me interested to see where they're actually going. We also had Tim turning to porn because of his impotence, I guess. I mean, this is more played for laughs. This whole story has been played for laughs. And I don't mind it, the Tim situation, the Timpotence, as it was called long ago on the show. And lastly, we had, Kevin and Abby getting back together. We had Kevin getting pissed one day and taking it out on Steven's car, and Steven going to the police. So, we have all these little stories, but nothing, I need a big story again from Corey. That's what had it going so good for me for so many months. Number one in my rankings, but it has fallen. And I don't like Fizz and Tyrone being center stage. That does not work for me at all. So I hope we're going to start developing some more intriguing, bigger stories going forward, because right now, not a whole lot is that exciting. The developments, though, for a lot of these stories still interest me, though, because I don't know where they're going, and I look forward to seeing where the Callie-Gary situation goes, if she will find out Gary killed her father, and we're going to see where that Audrey story goes, because that is interesting me as well.